can't get you out of my mind. It's like I feel it for the first time. Been thinking about you all night. I've been searching for this all my life. You're just my type. I've been looking.
Hey guys, it's Cameron. Welcome back to Life of a Dev, and today I'm going to be showing you guys how to use the Google Calendar API inside of Node.js. So I had a little bit of a hard time figuring out this API, and when I went to search for good resources, I just found it really hard. There was really no good examples, and the docs on Google Calendars, like the actual Google Calendar docs, are more request-based and like more HTTP request-based and not necessarily node-specific. So when I was playing around with this API, I found it particularly hard to get working, and it was just very few little things. So once I figured it out, it's really intuitive. But like I said, I got kind of stuck, and I just want to make a good tutorial so that way if people are stuck or don't know where to start, hopefully this tutorial will help them. So what we're going to be doing is we're actually going to be using Node.js to insert events into our personal calendar. You could do this with someone else's calendar, like if you're building an application and you wanted to insert it into the user of that application's calendar, you could do that. That's not what we're going to be doing today. This is more of an instance of you have a backend on Node.js, and you want the backend to insert events into a calendar. So let's say you're building like a booking app where your client or you or whoever it is owns like a restaurant or a hotel, and you want to be able to allot a hotel room to a specific amount of time. Whether that be 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, and then you want to insert that information into the user's calendar. That way they can see on their calendar, room 13 is booked out for 2 days, etc., or whatever the use case is. So the first thing we're going to want to do is just open up VS Code here. I just have a simple empty folder here, and we're going to want to open up a new terminal. And the first thing we're going to do is type npm init, and that's just going to go ahead and initialize a new project here. We can just leave all this blank up until author, and then you can just type in your name. I'm going to type in mine and just hit enter and then do MIT license. And if that information is correct, just go ahead and enter. So that's going to create a simple package.json file here. And then we're going to need one dependency, and that's going to be the Google API's node package. So we can do npm I, which is short for install. And then we can do Google APIs. And let's go ahead and let that install. It shouldn't take very long, but I will see you guys when it is done. Okay, so that package went ahead and installed. The next thing we're going to want to do is create a index.js file, and we can declare a constant value, or a constant value. We'll use destructuring because we want to grab, the reason we use destructuring is we only want to grab one specific thing from the Google API's package, and that is is Google. So we can't use from, but we can use request. So Google APIs. So basically we're just going to grab this Google value, or this Google function, out of the Google API's package here. And the next thing we're going to want to do is grab OAuth from within Google. So what we'll do is we'll create another constant value and use destructuring again. And in here we will do OAuth 2, because we're going to be using OAuth 2 for this project. And we'll just set that equal to google.auth. And then we're going to actually need a few things. We're going to need to create a project and get a client ID and a client secret and some other things. So we're actually going to need to open up a web browser here. And I already have it open here. Before we do this, if I can just ask you guys, don't forget to hit the like button. It really helps out with the Google Google algorithm. Some people say it doesn't, but I believe it does. If you guys enjoy the tutorial, just please hit the like button. It also helps me know what type of content you guys are enjoying and what type of content I should continue to make. So if you haven't already, just smash the like button. So what I've gone ahead and done is you just go to console.developers.google.com. Once again, that's consoles.developers.google.com. And you'll be pulled up to this Google API page. I've already gone ahead and went here. I also have a few other tabs open we'll be using later. But if you haven't created a project yet, you'll be brought to this page. And the first thing you want to do is just create a project. So it's going to give you some random project name. We're just going to call this G Calendar Project. And no organization, and just go ahead and hit enter. So that should go ahead and that should create our project here. Just go ahead and give it a second. And then it should automatically select this project. So once we've created a project, we're going to want to go ahead and enable a few APIs since we don't have any APIs enabled. So we can go ahead and click that button. And we're just going to search for the calendar. If it will type. Weird. Calendar. Oh. Yep, the Calendar API. So click the Google Calendar API and go ahead and click Enable. So it's going to go ahead and enable our Google Calendar API for our Google Calendar project. It's going to say you're going to need some credentials for this project. And we could click Create Credentials, but there's one step we need to do first. So if we just hit the that little hamburger menu here, go to API and Services, and click Dashboard here, we can then go to this little section called OAuth Consent Screen. So we need to create an OAuth consent screen before we can create OAuth credentials. OAuth consent screen you may have seen before. It's basically just a little pop-up that says this project wants to have access to your calendar or whatever it is. In this case, it's going to be our calendar. And then you can allow or deny that. You may have seen this when using sign in or sign up with Google on other websites that aren't Google. So if you sign in to like Facebook, well, Facebook's a bad example, but let's say you sign in to your favorite shopping website with Google, you've seen this OAuth consent screen. So we're going to be using external. Basically, any user with a Google account can authorize or we'll be able to get access via this consent screen, and go ahead and click Create. It's going to ask for an application name. We can just go ahead and call this Google Calendar. Google Calendar NodeJS app. And then once we give it a name, we can just skip the rest and click Save. So that's going to go ahead and create our OAuth consent screen. And once we have that OAuth consent screen created, we can go over to this Credentials tab. Now in this Credentials tab, we're not going to actually have any credentials. So we can go up to this button that says Create Credentials. We want to create an OAuth client ID. It is a web application. Once again, it's going to ask for a name, so we'll just call it the same thing, Google Calendar Node.js app. Once you've done that, go ahead and click Create. And this is going to give us our client ID and our client secret. Obviously, these are sensitive pieces of information, so don't share these pieces of information. Make sure they're not in your GitHub repo if you end up pushing this to a repo, or just make sure that you add whatever file these credentials are in to like a git ignore, or just make the repo private. I'm going to be deleting this project by the time I publish this video, so I don't mind sharing these with you at the moment. If you are looking at the code within the GitHub repo, because all of this code is going to be in a GitHub repo that I will link below, there will be pieces blocked out for you to put in your information. So we're just going to go ahead and hit OK. And as you see under our OAuth 2 client ID information, we have our credentials. The first thing we're going to want to do is hit the Edit tab here. And we're going to need to add an authorized redirect URL. We're going to be using the OAuth 2 library or playground. And the URL you can find that at is developers.google.com/OAuth2 or OAuth playground. So go ahead and open a tab and open this URL. And we're going to go ahead and copy that URL and add it to our authorized redirect URLs. Just make sure that there's no www in front of it, and make sure you remove that backtick. If you get a 404 error that says the redirect is not an authorized redirect URL, it is a problem with this format. Just make sure that it's formatted the exact same way you see here, and go ahead and hit save. Now that's going to bring us back to our credentials page. We're going to want to go back into the Edit tab. We have that URI or URL saved. So what we're going to need here is we're going to start with our client ID. So go ahead and grab that client ID, copy it to your clipboard, and head over to the developers.google.com/OAuth playground. In the top right hand corner, you're going to see this little cog. Go ahead and click that, and then go down to the bottom and check the box that says use my own OAuth credentials. We're going to need to paste our client ID into the section where it says client ID. And we're going to need to come back and grab our client secret and enter our client secret there. Once you've entered those two pieces of information, we can go ahead and hit close. And we need to add scope. Scope is basically what our project has access to. So in this tutorial, we're only going to be accessing the Google Calendar API. But as you see, there's tons of APIs that we can grant our application access to, and then the user can grant us that access. So go ahead and scroll down until you see the Calendar API, version 3, and we're going to need two pieces of scope. We're going to need the googleapis.com/auth calendar, and we're also going to need the googleapis.com auth calendar.events. So go ahead and click those two. So you a little checkbox next to both of those, and click Authorize API. Once you click Authorize API, if you get an error here, this is where the formatted URL is incorrect. We didn't get an error here, and as you see all my emails. I will block out all these emails for privacy information, except for the one that we are using, which is this one down here. So go ahead and click that, whatever email you're using to authorize the app, and it's going to come up with this page. It says this app is not verified. And the reason this comes up is because our application hasn't been verified by Google. You can apply to become verified, and I recommend that if you are going to use this in production. We're just using this for development purposes, so we will proceed. And to proceed, we need to click the Advanced tab and just hit Go to Google Calendar's Node.js app and then Unsafe. This is going to bring us to a page where we're going to authenticate. So it says grant the Google Calendar's Node.js app permissions for our calendar and to edit, share, permanently delete all calendar events. So we're going to hit allow on both of those, and that's going to bring us to a new screen where we're just going to confirm our choices. This is the OAuth consent screen that we created earlier, and we're just going to go ahead and click allow. This is going to bring us back to the playground where we see we have an authorization code, and what we need to do is we actually want the refresh token. So what we're going to do is we're going to click exchange authorization code for tokens. And that's going to give us a refresh token, and it's going to bounce us to the next step. So just go ahead and come back up here and click step 2. Once we've done that, we have all the information that we need to proceed with our application. So let's hop over back into our index.js file here. where we've declared OAuth2 is equal to Google Auth. And what we're going to do is we're going to declare a new OAuth client. And how we're going to do that is we're going to declare a constant value, and we're going to set that to OAuth2 client, and set that equal to new OAuth2. And within this, or within these parentheses here, or these brackets, or yeah, I think they're parentheses, we're going to need our client secret and our client ID. Our client ID comes first, so we can go ahead and open that tab back up, head back over to our project here, and we're going to grab our client ID here. So just single quotes and paste our client ID, and then we'll follow that by a comma, and then we will grab our client secret here, head back over, another set of single quotes, and paste our client secret. And then the next thing we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to need to set the refresh token for this new OAuth client that we just declared. So what we'll do is we'll do OAuth2 client dot set credentials, and that will be equal to, or within the set credentials method, we need to give it a object, and there's a parameter called refresh token. And that refresh token needs to be set to this refresh token that we just obtained from the OAuth2 playground. So if we go ahead and copy that, we can paste our refresh token into this object here. Now, once we have all this information, we officially have all the information needed to authorize our application, and we've already granted it access to the Google Calendar app. So what we need to actually do next is declare a calendar instance. So we'll go const calendar, and we'll set that equal to google.calendar. And this calendar method will take an object, and it will have two parameters. The first is the version, which is v3, and the next would be an auth parameter. And that auth parameter will be set to our OAuth2 client. So now we have this calendar event, or this calendar instance. We've authorized, or we have all our authorization information here, and we've passed the version and our auth credentials into this calendar instance. So the next thing we're going to need to do is we need to create a event that we can add to the calendar, and as well as start and end times. If you were doing this in production, you'd most likely do this in a form and then send that information to the backend. Since we're not going to be using a form, I'm going to declare static times for the start time and the end time of our calendar event. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to declare a constant event start time. And this will be equal to a new instance of the date, or a new date instance. And then below that, we actually want to modify this a little bit. So this would be set to a new date instance of the current date and time. We want to modify it just so slightly. So I don't want this calendar event to be inserted today, but I want it to start tomorrow. And how we're going to do that is we're going to call the setDate method on this event start time instance we have here. So if we go event start time dot set date, and we need to give it a number. So we can give it 4 because today is the 3rd, or we can do event start time dot get day, not date, get day, and we can just add 2. So that will set this that will set the date for tomorrow. And then, so once we have our event start time and we've set it for ahead of time, we need to create an event end time. And we're going to do that very similarly. So we'll do event end time, and we'll set that equal to a new date, a new instance of the date object. And we're going to do the same thing. So event end time dot set date is equal to event end time dot get day, and we're going to have this specific event end on the same day, but we want it to end 45 minutes after the start time. So basically this meeting or whatever, this event in our calendar, whatever it's going to be, which we'll probably use a meeting as an example, will be 45 minutes long. So what we can do is, since we've set the date, we can do a similar thing with the minutes. So set minutes is equal to event end time dot get minutes, and we'll just add 45. So we're changing the date and we're changing the minutes. So now we have a start time, which is a day advanced, and we have an end time, which is a day and 45 minutes advanced from the current date and time. So we just need these variables in our event, so that's why we've created them. Like I said, you'd probably get this information from a form on your website, and then the rest of this code would live on the back end. But since I don't want to go through the trouble of creating a form in this tutorials, mainly to show you how to use the Google Calendar API, I feel this is the easiest way to do it. So once we have an event end time and an event start time, we actually need to create the event, the actual event. So we'll just create a constant value of event, and we will set that equal to an object. Now, I'll leave links to the Google Docs, and the Google Calendar Docs, and this will explain everything that an event requires. We're just going to be going over the bare minimum. So if you'd like to look at those docs, I highly recommend it. So the first thing that this event needs is it needs a summary. Now the summary is basically like the title. So we'll just we'll use a meeting, and we'll just say meeting with Dave. And actually we'll do David, because David's a better name. I'm just joking. If your name's Dave, you're a great guy. I hope so. The next thing this event needs is a location. And this location is just an address. And what we'll do is we'll pop over here and we'll just do a Starbucks in California. And we'll just pop one of these open, and we will take the address. So I'm not in California, but we'll just grab a Starbucks that is in California. You hop back over to VS Code, and we'll just paste that address there. If you were meeting at like a hotel, or you wanted the restaurant location, you can do whatever. I don't believe this location is required. This location property is required, so you can totally leave it out. If it is required, you could probably still set it to null, and it would go through successfully. Once we have a location, we need a description. And this description will just be like what the event is about. So we'll say meeting with David to talk about the new client project and how to add the Google Calendar API. Convenient, right? a meeting with David to talk about the new client project and how to add the Google Calendar API. So once we have a summary, which is the title, the location of the meeting, the description, we need a start and end time. So these start and end times are actually objects. So we have start, which is an object, and they take two parameters. They take a date time parameter, which is equal to the date and time, which in our case is the event start time instance here. And then it also takes a time zone parameter. And this is any JavaScript, any standard JavaScript time zone. So we'll do America, Denver, America. If I can spell America, Denver, because that's where I'm currently at. And then we need an end time. And once again, it's an object. And it will take a date time property. And this will just be our event end time. Event end time. And then it as well takes a time zone property, which once again will do America, Denver. Okay, so this is the bare minimum requirements here. I'm also going to add another property, and it's called color ID. So if you ever look at your calendar and you see an event and it has a specific color, that is this color ID property, and I actually think it's a lowercase c. And we're going to go ahead and set that to 1. Google Calendar's API, or the Google Calendar API, has 11 different color IDs, and I've specified those within the README of the GitHub for this project. So if you want to go there and look at all the different colors, they are in the README. You can also go onto Google Calendar's docs, and I'm sure they're in there somewhere. Okay, so now that we've declared our actual event, we're basically ready to add it to our calendar. The thing is, what if we're busy? What if we already have something scheduled for this specific time and date? Google Calendar offers something called a free busy query, where basically we send off a query to the calendar and we check if there's any events within that time span. If you wanted to double book yourself, you don't have to worry about this part. If you want to make sure that you're not overriding any events, then go ahead and follow along. There are certain instances where you would want to double book yourself. Let's take the booking a hotel room. A hotel may have hundreds and hundreds of rooms, and if there's one person booked for a weekend, we wouldn't want our Google Calendar API to send back an error saying that there's already a time slot, or there's already an event for that time slot. So what you'd most likely have is a database with your hotels and all the hotel rooms. And then when this is hit, you would check that database, see if there's an open hotel room for that time. You would reserve that hotel room in the database, and then you would send this event to your calendar with the hotel room maybe inside the summary or the description of the event. In this case, it's a meeting. So we're going to be gone. We're going to be out of the office meeting with David to talk about the client project and how to add the Google Calendar API, because David is the king of the Google Calendar API. So we don't want any other events within this time slot. We want this time to talk to David. So what we're going to do is we're going to call our calendar instance. We're going to call a freeBusy, or we're going to hit the freeBusy method, and we're going to query it. Now, inside this query, it's going to take an object, and it's also going to spit back an arrow function. And this arrow function is going to have either an error or a response. Now, inside this first object, we're going to have a resource property. And this resource property is going to have a time minimum and a time maximum property, a time zone, and what calendar we're going to be querying. I'll try to explain that a little bit better, but let's go ahead and jump right into it. So the first thing we need is the time min. And we're going to set that to our event start time. And then we're going to have a time max. And we're going to set that to our event end time. So basically, that's just the minimum time and the maximum time, and that's basically the block of time we're querying. So we're saying, is there any events between these two times? The next thing it needs a time zone. It needs to know where it's at. So once again, we're going to do America / Denver. That's just because that's where I'm located. You could do New York. You could do basically any JavaScript time zone. And you can Google that and it will give you an entire list. After this time zone element, we need or time zone property, we need something called items. And this items property is an array. Now, this items property is an array of calendars. So let's say your user controls 7 calendars. They may have shared access to other calendars. They may just have their one single calendar. So you could put, this is basically an array of objects with all the calendar IDs within them that the user has access to. So let's say they have their primary calendar, and then they have a work calendar, and then they have a calendar that their boss is tied on to. You would put all those calendars in here with their calendar IDs, and you would check all the calendars to see if that person is free or busy. In this instance, we're only going to focus on our primary calendar, which is what most people have. If you have a Google account with one Google Calendar, that's your primary calendar. So this items property is going to be an array of objects. In our case, it's going to be one object, and it's going to have an ID. This object is going to have an ID property. And this is where it would be the ID of each calendar that you're checking. In our case, we're just checking one calendar, and we're just checking our primary calendar. So I hope I explained that. I explained that as best as I could. If you have any questions, don't be afraid to ask. But like I said, this is just an array of objects for every single calendar we want to check if they're free or busy. And in our case, we're just checking the one primary calendar for this user. So these are the minimum requirements for our free busy query. This will be sent off, and it will either come back with an error or a response. So inside this arrow function, the first thing we want to do is check if there's an error. So if an error exists, we just want to return, and we want to console log that, or console error that error. And we can just call this free busy query error. If I can spell. And then we also want to log the actual error. So that way we can tell what type of error it is and what the actual error is. If there's not an error, we're going to get this response back. Now, this response is going to have a lot of information. We only want the events that come back from this query within this time span. And how we can get that is we can declare a variable called events, if I can spell, still can't spell, events array. And this events array will be equal to response.data. I think it's calendars. I hope I can spell calendars right. Calendars, and then the calendar ID, which in our case is the primary calendar. And it's busy. So if you wanted to console log out this response and see all the data it contains, you're more than welcome to. We just want the events array, which is within the response. There's an object called data. Within that object, there's an object called calendars, the calendar ID that we're querying. So if you're querying multiple different calendars, you'd want to loop over this calendars object and then check each busy. But since we're only looking for one, we wouldn't do that. You could do a for each loop over that calendar or over the calendars object to see if there's if there's anything for all of the calendars within that object. We know we only want one, so we're just checking our primary calendar. And then this busy is going to be an array with the time ranges telling us if we're busy or not. So once we've declared that, we want to basically just check if this array exists or if it's empty. So we can go if events array dot length, almost forgot that, equals 0. So basically what this is saying is if there's nothing in this event array, then we want to return. And what we're going to return is we're going to actually return the creation of this calendar event. And how we do that is we do calendar dot events dot insert. And this insert is going to take an object and as well as an arrow function. And this arrow function is going to have an errors parameter if there's an error. So inside this object here, it's going to have two properties. One is the calendar ID, which once again is going to be our primary. And the second is going to be our actual event. So this is actually going to be under resource. And that's going to be our event. And the event is right here, is what we've created, this meeting with David at the Starbucks in California at these two start and end times. So we can just go ahead and pass the event object in as our resource. And then in this arrow function, once again, we're just going to check if there is an error. And if there is an error, we're going to return a console.error. And we're just going to we'll just call it calendar event creation error. That way we kind of know what's going on here. And then we also want to log the actual error. And I spent one too many hours. Okay, so if there's an error, we want to console error that error. If there's not an error, if there's no error, then we just want to return console.log. And we'll just do calendar event created. Calendar event created. So that way we know that the event was created. And there's one last thing we want to do. So we checked if this error or event array, so we checked if we're busy or not. But we're not doing anything if we're actually busy. We're only doing something if we're not busy. So below this return statement, we're going to enter another return statement. And in our case, we're just going to console.log the fact that I'm busy. Oop. And since I did a semicolon there, it's going to freak out. So I'm going to change these single quotes, since I used a semicolon or not a semicolon. Since I used a single quote in we're going to change these to backticks, and that should fix everything. And we can go ahead and hit save, and that should be our completed application. So if everything goes as planned, if we clear our console here, and we go node./index, and we hit enter, we shouldn't get any errors. That's if I've written everything correctly, which may not have happened. But let's go ahead and see. Awesome. So we see that we have created this calendar event successfully. So let's go ahead and open up our calendar, which I have open here. And as you see, we have an event for tomorrow that says meeting with David at that location. We have a meeting to talk with David about the new client project and how to add the Google Calendar API. It's going to remind us 30 minutes before, and it's from 9:03 to 9:48, which is exactly 45 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that event. And let's say we wanted this event, just as an example, to span multiple days. So all we would do is we would change this end time, and I want it to span until Friday. So let's say we're going out to California to talk to David because we're here in Denver, and we're going to go for 2 days. So I went ahead and hit save, and I'm going to run that again. It's going to take a second, but it should create that calendar event successfully. And as you see, we are 3 days. We expand out, meeting with David. As you see, it's Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And as you see, it's from 9:04 to 9:49, which is exactly 45 minutes and 3 days. So, and as you see, it has this nice bluish color. If you change that color ID to 2 and hit save and then rerun that, we should get a new calendar event. Oh, look, sorry, I'm busy. So there's that busy free query. It checked to see if there was an event in there. There was an event, so it responded that we're busy. We're busy from that time frame, and we're not going to be able to make that meeting. So let's just go ahead and delete that so we won't get that error. And let's run it one more time just so I can show you the color change. Event created successfully. We hop back over, and we should see this event populate here shortly. I'm just going to go ahead and refresh just to make sure it happens. And we should see now it's green. So I've listed all the color IDs within the README of the GitHub repo, which is linked below. I hope you guys enjoyed today's tutorial. If you guys have any questions or you're confused about this API, don't be afraid to leave a comment. Don't be afraid to open an issue on the GitHub. If you find anything or you just have a question, I'll try to help you guys out. You guys can always PM me. You guys can find me on Instagram. You can find me on Twitter. I'll have all the links to that as well in the description below. Don't forget to like today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope this helped someone out because I know I was having a little bit of a hard time. Mine was specifically with authorization. But I know the Google Calendar API can be a little bit hard to wrap your head around, especially if you've never worked with the Google Calendar API in the first place. So I hope you guys enjoyed. And one more thing, like I said, there may be an instance where you don't want to use this free busy query. If you don't want to use the free busy query, you would basically just do calendar.events.insert and use this information here. In this case, I did want to use the free busy query, so I used it. Like I said, you can also change your time zone to whatever you guys need. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys did enjoy and you found this video helpful, please leave a like. Really helps me out, guys. Don't forget to share it with a friend if you have a developer friend. I know that's few and far between. Developer friends are hard to find, but you got a friend in me. And I hope to see you guys in the next one. Later, guys.